Right, here in 1699, nothing happened in the events phase of any interest. Nobody even tried to play it shit. You can call that my laziness or whatever, but I didn't see anything that wanted to be played at that moment coming out. However, the commerce phase, heavily impacted. First of all, the markets have opened up, but just because of, losses of ships. But oh boy, Spain going free market opens up all kinds of stuff. For one thing, it opens up Spain to the idea of, hey, other people can get into my markets. I'm going to shove my nose into markets that do better. In fact, maybe working a little with Holland, they pushed their way into some markets. The English went to what worked best for them, and then the Dutch positioned themselves to compete directly with the English and also to fill in some of the vacant spaces, allowing Spain kind of a nice freedom in the locations where they went, all dependent on the ordering, which is dependent, of course, on your prestige. Holland having the last go, they get to decide who to favor and who to penalize. However, they still made enough to go to the triple structure value, as well as paying to try to get a ship. Only Spain got a ship. England didn't have enough to do anything special. In fact, they only avoided the structure penalty because Spain was spending more than them by the fact that Spain built a fourth ship. So now England doesn't lose any traction from that. Nobody lost anything from the high competition, but still, we're seeing how this is kind of tailoring out. And notably, places like Sweden and France, which have taxation policies, they've become anathema. Nobody wants to go in there. There are tons of good places to go. Especially, the Dutch could have eked out more money by going into, say, Spain here. The tissues isn't interesting to them, but probably that iron up in Sweden is worth more than some of the places they went. They went to target the English, actually. And then if they dispose of England's commercial prowess, then they'll turn on France. They're seeing what they can do. But the simple fact that taxation isn't working anymore means these countries are more likely to go to the free trade in order to get the military benefit, especially France, who really could use that. Sweden probably doesn't need leaders as badly as France does. And then by taking that step, well, then that opens up more markets, but it also means they will never be able to get a new trade fleet up until they return to at least only to a tax policy. So it's an interesting kind of situation in a different kind of world, definitely to Spain's advantage, primarily because of Holland kind of moving out of their way everywhere where Spain kind of stuck their nose. But to tell you the truth, Holland was not in the most advantageous places to begin with. They're still not. They still have better cost ratios that they can make, but they're making tons of money, enough to pay their triple share, so why not try to restrict other people's money as well? It's clear that an acceptable peace would come up for, especially from Austria's point of view. In fact, this one was not an acceptable peace for Austria's point of view. However, please go away. They were forced into it by their allies, and they could not have afforded a war alone against Turkey. Even though they're a little stronger right now, it just would have been too much of a crapshoot, especially since that would have opened them up to war with, say, Poland or something, which could just say, hey, while you're there, you mind if I just take some of your territory? Like Silesia. So what ended up happening was they were able to come to an agreement. Now, Turkey lost something like 10 prestige off this peace because they gave up Austria itself, the whole of the Crimea, which only counts as one pick, Podolia, here to the Poles, and whatever the hell this is, the Carpathians here. Question was, of course, should they have had to give up more of Hungary? I think it's either Hungary is ceded as one piece or it can be ceded individually if it can't all of it be ceded. And basically this was the situation. Only one territory could be ceded. Austria obviously comes away with 2 of the land picks, but Russia gets 3 territories out of it. To balance that out, a prestige pick was taken. Now, I did not go with the double prestige because Turkey would have fallen below 5 on their prestige table and thus couldn't accept the peace. They would have had to refuse it, taking 3 or whatever hits. It actually would have been 4. Well, we'll see. And also a financial. This was a double hit financial, which only cost them 2 political points, and that'll give everybody $9 except Austria gets 8. Whether or not Turkey can afford that, hard to tell. Her economy is kind of a mess right now, to tell you the truth. But that's where we are, and move on to the minors, and then we've got this very likely declaration of war against Holland. Maybe France can get something out of it for their chit, maybe not. Worst comes to worst, England has to take a chance and maybe not be able to do this because the rest of their alliance does not have any kind of... Russia has one. They might be willing to sell cheaper than France would, having no commercial interests of their own either. That makes it more likely. Given that this war against Holland has something of a general value to everyone in the game, France's demands were quite high. Let me in the war. I want to be your allies. I want to join the alliance. And forgive my war debts. The answer was no. Spain especially is due a lot of money, and they know they're going to need a significant amount to rebuild naval losses, although they can, I keep forgetting, build 1 per turnover in Cuba at a cheaper price. Russia, however, was willing to grant their chit for future considerations because no one really had a peace that they want to give up at this moment. But the general feeling that, hey, you know, we did our job, we're willing to let you guys do your job and help you out there. And, well, it's not a great thing for Russia, actually. You might say that Russia, Austria, Poland, up here at the top end of the chart, kind of would like to have had this be a peace turn because then they drift down more slowly. But again, there seems to be a general value to knocking Holland down right now. If we take a look at the victory points, Holland is at 404. Russia's at 256. You know, France, on the other hand, is so far behind that they really needed to make up some ground here, and that's not being allowed. So this was a free casus belli. No additional temporary political issues gained. The minors, they're going to make this thing a bitch. So it's hard for me to remember who's got what minors when they're all on the board. I use the mnemonic of putting them near the country, which helps when they're not in play. But now I'm going to have to start looking up to see which ones are here. What do we have that came in? Well, notably Denmark did not, which would have been one of the major ones. But the Dutch got Portugal, and they also got part of their German alliance, most of their German alliance, Bavaria, the Palatinate. England got Hanover, though, which adds to the Prussian side of things. The Prussians did not get Hesse. Spain didn't get Venice, but they got to add Savoy into the battle. And, well, now it's time to build our armies and move forward. And, you know, of course, the Dutch might end up supporting the Irish Catholic revolt here. It's such a weird situation. So, like, the Hungarian revolt is still growing, but it's down to 1 province. I'm not sure if they can continue attacking Hungarian territories or what. I'm also not sure what value there is to that and who controls them. None of that's really specified. Essentially, this is, you know, a peace for Turkey, so unless they end up stuck in another war somehow, and God knows how they could. There are things like perfidy, I guess, could do it. Or someone like Spain could move against them. But yeah, overall, I don't see too many people lining up to hit Turkey. So it may just be best to sit back and ignore it, because why lose troops? I have few enough. I think I'm down to 1 unit on the board left. And then there's also, so like the Russians, I think they get the troops that Turkey had from here. I've got to reassign troops. I think I put things everybody got, but I didn't remove the Turkish ones yet. Another headache that I don't know if I want to cope with. Okay, well, what we see, I've got to grab my new alliances out, is with the economics, still recuperating type situations. For example, Austria, with almost no income, had to take out more loans. They're pushed up to 40 in public debt. They're going to have a hard time recovering, even with the additional territory they've added. The only way that they can gain their Hungarian territories, it seems to me, is to have big allies like Russia and Poland to come into their play. Speaking of the armies, well, Russia's economics aren't in that great a situation yet. I'm not sure what they're spending. I think they must have a bit of a loan. They weren't really able to build their army, and I'm trying to figure out why. They were back one space, but their revenue should have been sufficient that they built up a little bit more. They have a decent amount here, but that's just a couple of bucks. I'm trying to figure out what I spent. I spent a couple of bucks in supporting that, 3 more in the war, in the loans that they had. That brings me up to 5, 6, 7. I was down $1. I think I screwed up. I'll build 1 calf. I screwed up their economics, and just wasn't sure. I think what happened was I ended up paying their war debt, their public debt twice, the interest on that. Trying to rebalance the income as I was working. Yeah, so we're not seeing, a huge growth though in Russia. Their income isn't that big. Poland's income's a little bigger. They have no debt. Their army is at full size. Now it comes to the, well, what do you do with cash problem in the game? Prussia's got that problem too. I did remember to spend on all my fortresses. I think the Spanish didn't build up the Milanese fortress, but they spent on their other ones. Oop, no, they didn't spend on Franche-Comté either, figuring the Dutch are not going to get that far, or if they do, we're hosed anyway. Alright, that puts us into the military phase of this next war. Now, I have to be careful, because once I move into 1700, new artillery batteries and depots, I think, become available. If I miss something like that by a year or two, it's not that big a deal, though. These phase changes are indicating broad trends over a period. Them coming in a specific year is just not, that historically relevant. Okay, so the English alliance gets to move first, regardless of any great value of the Dutch prestige, because they declared their war. And the big English, really allied fleet, there's Prussians, there's Spaniards in there, has parked itself outside of the Dutch harbor. They can't go in and attack it. If it were not a military harbor, i.e. if it didn't have one of these little anchors on it, they could just attack them anyway. That's one of the issues that's kind of, you can exist in port, not in a military harbor, but you're free to be attacked. But in this case, you can't run the guns like you could in Empires in Arms. And for that matter, in EU too, you can. So they're just parked outside, hoping to intercept. Now, their chance of interception isn't terribly great. And in fact, having the admiral assigned there isn't terribly useful. But there's no other stack that he could command. So he's going to take command of the Grand Fleet, split things up if needed. What I haven't done is I haven't assigned the generals yet, which I should have done. I should also assign some forces. Yeah, there's what the admiral's going to do. He's going to watch the Portuguese fleet. I didn't notice them there, and I've forgotten some of the other things. But this is going to present the Dutch with a bit of a problem. They have to choose whether to try to run a larger fleet in order to maybe challenge the privateers that are going to be out there. And I've got them all over the place, trying to pick off the Dutch shipping. And that will strip away much of the Dutch ability to produce income during the war. Or just hope for the best in terms of holding off the Prussian army, because with this big fleet there, the English aren't transporting units anywhere. Taking into account the miners, an English fleet came down here to patrol the Portuguese. Now, they could have tried to intercept. It's a larger Spanish fleet that slipped out. Could have tried to intercept that, but they did not. A big fleet here, but the problem is the Dutch aren't so terribly threatened. I think there's only one privateer in play, two privateers in play at this point, because I'm using, I had to tie down a squadron to face the Portuguese. Now, I didn't need that big a squadron. I got 5 ships there. I could probably get away with just one. I'm sorry, just like 3 or 4. But that's what we went with. Now, the English and the Spaniards, I believe, are both building military ships, which will be available next turn. So in the long run, we kind of got the opportunity to have more ships as we see it. The Dutch don't have any shipbuilding underway. So there's a little bit of leeway there, and it's going to make things a little tough on the Dutch as to what choice to make. If their colonial shipping isn't threatened, they probably don't want to engage in a naval battle. They also have the risk, though, of the Spanish army moving against the Portuguese, which would strip away those boats and allow a great deal of depredation against their shipping eventually. Dutch choose to go for it. Their fleet is almost as large, and it's all Dutch ships, which is important because the English and the Dutch hit on 4, 5s, and 6s. They, however, failed to find the enemy, but this is going to cause a problem for the alliance. They're going to have to try to figure out how to cope with that Dutch fleet. They may have to sail down, pick up this squadron and face it, and really bring it down to a big naval battle. They were hoping their size would dissuade the Dutch from the attack. Now we move to the land. Russians march up and they capture Oldenburg, and this offers an interesting situation. They have 2 options here. There was a unit there. They can either, as in Empires in Arms, take Oldenburg and declare it's now under their protection, and now it becomes a minor country which can produce troops for them. Or they could, on the opposite side, end up simply declaring that they're conquering the territory, which is the piece that they're going to take. They're going to declare that they've captured Oldenburg. That means, well, it remains a Dutch minor, which doesn't really matter. There are no troops left on the board. However, it is available as a peace treaty condition, which means the Germans could gain that. They're interested. They have claim to all of Germany, essentially. So they have no problem with trying to absorb, with absorbing Oldenburg as part of their territory. What they're looking at is the Dutch are not going to be able to match their army. And they're certainly not going to be able to match their army in conjunction with a Spanish army, with whatever Britain can bring across the channel. Britain's got a decent sized army, but the boats are tied up. So if we win this war, whether we win or lose the war, actually, it matters very little whether I have this extra strength point, as it were. And that's how I'm looking at that. So now it's up to the Dutch. They were unable to intercept anywhere, just failures across the board. Now it's up to the Dutch to try to maybe hit one of these disparate forces separately. They're in a lot of danger. If somebody doesn't give them, sell them, whatever, there's a counter that allows the Dutch to open the floodgates, as it were. If they don't have that, they're in serious threat of being forced into a surrender very quickly on the land war. And the spring turn ends with the Dutch winning a major battle. The Prussians intercepted them as they tried to collect their forces and were driven back. Same effect as really what the Dutch wanted to do, except, well, if they could hold Oldenburg at the end of the year, they'll get free reinforcement. And reinforcements are a tough thing for the Dutch here. They don't have an easy way to build a lot of troops. Remember, if you try to build more than the troops you're allowed, and they're only allotted 2, you're in a position where you increase the chances of losing 1 plus the number of additional troops that you try to recruit. So if you tried to recruit 3 troops, you have you will probably lose 2 of those 3 on a bad die roll. And the more you do, the better the chance of losing the troops, and the more troops, of course, you lose. You'll always have, like, I think, some amount left, right? Because it's only 1 plus the extra amount. So in the Dutch case, they'll always have 1 unit left that they can build. They've got a problem, though, because they also have to build boats. And their army was at max size. There wasn't anything more they could walk into this war with. Geez, let's not forget about all their miners. They gathered the Bavarians and going to get the Palatinate, try to provide some strength against the Prussian force. But over here, a march into, what is that, Granada, didn't manage to catch the Spanish troops. The Spanish still have a couple of units they want to gather together before they launch their combat against it. And it was to try to get a jump on the march in order to hit first. All right, into the fall. Dutch managed a massive naval victory against the Allied forces, wiping out most of the power. I screwed up and forgot to play this mutiny chit, which would have prevented an interception attempt. Again, the damn event chits, I have to just live with the fact that I'm not going to catch them most of the time, and then I'll be happier overall. That's something I've learned with other games of this nature. All right, on to the land phase, and we'll see. Here's where the Dutch are weak, and I just don't see a way around this. But the Allies are not going to be able to win the kind of decisive victory that they want if the Dutch can win that land, or if the Dutch win at sea. They can force the Dutch to lose. They can take Zeeland away from them, but there's only so much they can do about the prime problem, which is actually all this shipping. However, they are picking it away. They took 2 last turn. They didn't get any successes this turn. Okay, well, the Allies were unable to really come to grips with the Dutch forces. We got, son of a bitch, the Bavarians up here in Brabant, and they are really a fairly major factor in this game. Not able to bring anything to bear. We've got a siege here, over here, unable to catch the Portuguese in a fight. And then over here in New York, the English were actually defeated by the rebels. So no gain there. I had to go back in time, remember to do my Austrians. They wanted to clear up one more territory. Turkey's not worrying about it. They've only got really one territory that's in trouble because the war kind of cleared out most of their rebellion. They have no army, so they can't do anything about it anyway. And, well, we'll do the life phase and the victory point phase. You can see the Dutch are still kicking around at 20. Not bad for them. As I push into the 1700 turn, I found something ugly. I don't know how much it affected anything. But artillery, more artillery shows up at certain periods. And this is one where, a bunch of countries get one extra. Depots, however, it looks like you were always allowed the full countermix. I can't find any indication that that's not the case. Some scenarios, like the English had a depot earlier, now they wouldn't in the 1700 scenario. And they have quite a pool of them, and there doesn't seem to be any time when a country starts out with more than like one or two of them. So, and they're not divided the way the artillery is. So I just kind of misread what's going on with that. Anyway, the Dutch are not going to be able to get out of this war. The goal is to drive their prestige down, to get high claims against them. Well, it's possible that if sufficient claims could be gained, sufficient peace conditions could be gained, that the alliance would allow the war to end. But as it stands right now, there's no real reason not to continue. There's no real reason. There's nothing the Dutch can offer. Basically, the land territory has to be stripped from them, in addition to the political and I'm not sure what what other conditions would be placed on them. The other problem is they can't offer a big peace. The best they can offer is, I think this counts as a half point. This captured neutral territory. They can offer like one peace condition, I guess, and that would be it, assuming they haven't captured anything on an opponent. Before we move on, I forgot. I had the victory conditions I was planning on assessing on this 1700 turn, because this is really the start of the Spanish succession scenario anyhow. I also have to look up the special rules on that. But what we have, England got points for, as did Holland, for Spain still owning Flanders and stuff like that. Austria got points for having regained this. They got 10 points for having at least one of these, I guess. And they also got points because France did not win anything or hold on to anything related to the Spanish Succession War. Poland got points because Austria is not Turkish anymore. And I guess that's it. Now I gotta figure out what to do with the Spanish Succession War scenario notes. With a little bit of spousely aid, I worked my way through this. This was the Augsburg scenario. So either way, though, France didn't gain anything down here for either scenario. There are some problems in this one because Spanish succession's been resolved, and we're in the Spanish Succession War. I'm going to assign the points for that resolution at the end of this scenario, which should be in, what? Looks like 13. Somewhere around 13. Maybe earlier, maybe later, depending on how this all boils out, because we've had and are in the midst of the big war here. Okay, so other than looking through this whole list of special rules, other than what's set, what's missing, the only thing that's missing is the Great Northern War. Everything else has kind of been taken into place. Now, the Great Northern War is included in this by giving, on the first turn, Poland and Russia free declarations of war against Sweden if they wish them. and vice versa. And wait, what's this? This is just status. And then there's a historical, if Sweden makes it down into the Ukraine, they'll cause a national revolt there. Trying to see if there's anything else that I should give there. These are all optional, but they seem to fit nicely. Okay, and then for the victory points in this one, France and Austria get 10 if the dynasty goes in their direction. Well, Austria has that already. Spain gets points for controlling Flanders, Lombardy, Tuscany, and Naples. And they get a bonus. They have to hold 3 of them, and if they get all 4, they get twice as many points. They get 10 instead of 5. Holland and England get points if Flanders is Austrian. Okay, now this presupposes some situations, I think. I'm willing to leave it at that because I'm not really convinced that either Holland or England particularly wants it Spanish. Holland feels very threatened by Spain at this point in the game, the way the politics have gone. And England isn't terribly thrilled with Spain either. So we'll leave it at Austrian because that is not Spanish, nor is it French. And a Spain that's doing as well as it is kind of scary in some ways. Maybe. At least as well as it is on the map after the succession crisis. So I'll say that's okay. Turkey's going to get points for controlling, well, one of these, and probably double if they have both. It looks like just one. Sweden gets points, okay, if they capture Warsaw once in the game and Moscow once in the game, or if they create the Ukrainian revolt. And that's 5 points for Warsaw and 10. Oh, I forgot about Saxony. We'll get back to that. And 10 points if they get a problem over here against Russia. Russia is going to get 5 points for controlling the Crimean territory. Now, back to Saxony. Okay. Saxony achieves a special situation here. Because we have Augustus II on the throne, and we should have probably implied this earlier, they're going to automatically enter any war with Poland. But if either Saxony or Mazovia are occupied by an enemy army, it reverts Saxony to a normal minor ally at that point. Just kind of disassociating the national endeavors between them. Again, this game doesn't hold together the way in terms of getting the events delivered. First of all, it's not expected to even deliver these events, but it doesn't hold, except for the Spanish succession. It doesn't hold together when I try to piece them together the way EU sort of does. And there's no question EU's got, its own flimsiness. Anyway, onward into the 1700 turn. And we've got this interesting situation where there are reasons for a free casus belli between Poland, Russia, and Sweden. Are they going to be taken up? I don't know. Sweden's kind of weak. Do they have allies? They have France. That's not terribly compelling as an advantage. Okay, commerce-wise, the poor economic situation came up in one of the chits, and I remembered it this time. Prohibited Holland from being able to conduct the high competition. And, well, the fact that there's some Spanish ports that the Dutch can't enter because they're at war with Spain means that, and that they kind of counted on, means some of the English shipping actually ended up protected, and they made some money. The Spanish also made some money, not much. I think they only had one successful place. But in essence, everybody kind of broke even except for the Dutch, who ended up getting their 2 prestige off of pushing, putting double out and also having the largest total out of anyone. All right, diplomatic dealings somewhat difficult here. So the Dutch first had the option to try to sue for peace in some form or another. The Allies can't afford to. If they sue for peace, the Dutch will accept it and bang, the war's over, no good. The Dutch are in a position where they haven't actually lost anything. So they can sue for the compromise peace. They lost a half point here, but it's got to be a full point that's going to cost them against in order to penalize them for the point spread. Because they sued for the compromise peace, which essentially says each side can pick the peace process. They picked that one because it has the highest cost. And so they took a 3-point hit along with everybody else in it in temporary PP. Why? Because they're expecting they're going to take a big drop in prestige and they want to regain as much of that as they can. Putting some of the stuff in the bank right now that they lose, and in fact they might win some of this back in a battle. Would have made more sense last turn. However, they didn't have the option because war comes after you get to sue for peace. So anyway, they forced a temporary hit on everyone. That temporary hit probably doesn't mean a lot in any case. The Allies are probably going to regain enough points. But if they push themselves over the 15 limit due to the peace, they don't get these points back. So there is some advantage to the Dutch for doing this. They expect they're going to lose this war. During minor countries, the big effect there, Hesse came into the game, but Spain used its shit to gain control of Bavaria. They switched sides. So the Bavarian army, which really was kind of a threat against Prussia and might have been able to swing the tide of things, it's gone now. So there's essentially nothing preventing the Dutch from being destroyed there. Of course, at sea, the world's a little different, and a lot of this whole conflict has to be decided at sea. Speaking of which, we got 2 new trade fleets we built this turn. Okay, they're not in play yet. Those aren't new, those are rebuilds. And then Russia declared war on Sweden. They talked to Poland and Austria and said, look, I'm not going to call you guys in, but I want to take advantage of this war. If you want to come in, feel free, but I don't see what. This is going to be a kind of interesting war. So Poland doesn't want to be in it. Austria definitely doesn't. Poland does not want to be in it either. So they also withheld from joining into the war. They have nothing to gain. The question is, how much does Russia have to gain? They have Finland, but the problem is they have no way of bringing the war to Sweden. They don't have a navy. And they do have something important they could lose. If they lose St. Petersburg in this, that's a big hunk of points. More than this war is probably going to be worth to them. However, they also have very large armies that they can shift into play. I've thrown their feudal units on the board. And Sweden is, of course, not in the best of shape. Sweden does have Charles XII, though, who is more than a match for Peter, and he's got his own little victory conditions here if he can take Moscow. The Ukraine, he doesn't get the advantage from, because that's Polish territory still. He wants the war with Poland. He isn't going to get that, at least not at this point. And that's another reason Poland doesn't want this war. Poland's got this special situation with Saxony, etc. They just don't want to play in that world. All right. I guess it's time for the financial side. Well, the Dutch economy is not really geared for handling a land war where they're actually fighting, losing big chunks of their territory. Now, granted, they have this $8 that can't be touched because they are the masters of the sea, which I guess is a big deal. You know, if you compare it to, it's better than, say, the Austrian economy right now. But we're also seeing, I don't know, Sweden and Russia trying to build up their forces. Russia ended up getting the bad roll and losing the one of 2 units they tried to create. You can always lose your muster whenever you're at war. But the Dutch, even with cash on hand, etc., left over, they did not have enough money because they've got such high costs, both for maintaining their navy and then also maintaining it at sea. A couple extra bucks for that. They just didn't have enough money to build more than their couple of units. They weren't able to say throw $5 into. Well, actually, it would only be $3 into building another naval unit. They're going to have to make do with the navy they have, which is kind of a difficult thing because, well, we see the Spanish are still building more navies, but the English were unable to afford. They would have had to pay the $5 and roll the dice for it. The Spanish are paying $3 to rebuild one of their navies. The other problem is, I know what the big problem is. It's not the cash, it's the manpower. They only have 2 manpower. And did I roll this? I did not. Yeah, and they're screwed on rest as well. I got a 4 on that table. That means we're going to have a revolt. It's nearly impossible to focus and understand what the hell's going on in the game. This is just me. My lack of ability to focus. Anyway, what we had was started off with kind of the naval phase, but I only did half of it. I forgot there was a Russian-Swedish war. The Dutch sailed. I'm sorry. The Dutch did something. Who the fuck knows? Yeah, the Dutch sailed out to engage the British admiral here, who had only 5 ships. The Dutch had about 8. Big numerical advantage, but wind gauge went to the English, and they had the advantages towards it by having an admiral who could command a small squadron. The odds difference between 5 and 8 is not that big when you get first shot if you're the 5. And not that the Dutch have an admiral, so they couldn't have gotten too much of a bonus off this anyway. And so the English actually got like, I don't remember, 4 hits out of 5 or something like that. And then the Dutch came back and only got a couple of hits out of the 5 ships or 4 ships they had remaining. I think it was actually 9-5 because, yeah. Anyway, the Dutch ended up bottled up here in Portugal, and the English reinforced their fleet by sailing it back and forth. And then started using their leadership, well, using their now newfound advantage of naval superiority to go hunting and privateering actions again, rather than bring more English troops in. Started screwing up around here, thinking Bavaria was still Dutch. You know, I mean, I don't have a good way of recognizing who owns what. Unlike EU, there's not like some space where I can look, oh yeah, that's that country's, right? And there aren't all the flags and all kind of other stuff to help you understand. And then I completely forgot about this. Then I moved my Russians and said, oh shit, I can't do that. The Swedes got to do their navy first. So, I don't know, everything's screwed up. I'm halfway through the military phase and just trying to fudge it as best as I can at this point. Okay, interesting situation here. Zealand has fallen, which means the English can conceivably get something out of this war. If they don't ship some troops over to England or to the Americas, that's not going to work. Put a yellow marker here, I guess. Anyway, Zealand's fallen. This huge Prussian army, combined Prussian, German, Bavarian, all kind of stuff, all German stuff, was trying to hunt the Dutch down. They failed. The situation in Finland was the most interesting. So I shipped Charles and a small force into play, and a somewhat larger but not huge Russian force was next to him. The Russians, as they moved in next to him to conquer Karelia or whatever, and the Swedes intercept. So Charles gets a roll. What level is he? He's a level 0. Very ahistorical. He's knocked down to just 1 unit in the first firing round and withdraws from combat. He's not even broken yet, but he doesn't want to get captured. He's down to 1 unit. He has to withdraw back on the ships because he can't sea transport now. during his land movement, the Swedes don't actually get a counter. So now they've lost Finland, and at this point, they have to do a naval invasion to be able to land anywhere. And the only places they can choose are really these three, unless they want to slip all the way around to the Black Sea, which they could do. It's not like Russia has a navy to interfere with them. Kind of an amusing idea. Not much can be done about it, though. You know, countries like Turkey aren't going to intervene on Sweden's part. They don't have any army. The only person who might would be Poland. So the question is, how well is Russia doing? And Russia's doing fairly well, you know, in the moderate average sort of range, but Poland's doing a lot better. Poland's up near the rich end of things. Yeah, they're not going to try to kick their way in here, and Sweden's actually kind of on the poorer end as well. The Poles just don't see too much advantage. If the Russians start losing forces, there might be a reason for the Poles to break their alliance and try to get into this. The problem is, what legitimate right do they have to do so? Well, they could make an alliance with Sweden. They have not been at war with Russia yet in this gigantic, long series of war turns. So I think they can go to war with Russia. Alternatively, though, if there was they could go to war with Austria, perhaps, or something else. Lots and lots of options. At the very least, they're interested in, well, they own Galicia. Austria's interested in Galicia. Austria's not attacking anyone. All right, anyway, we're going into the fall turn here, and hopefully I'll be a little bit more focused when I do it, because this was kind of a mess, the way this week. I'm okay with how it turned out, but you know, I had the Russians already moved up here when I realized, wow, shit, I've got to have the Swedes in place. And the end of the 1700 turn, what do we get out of this? Portuguese were defeated down here. The Dutch were destroyed here, but their honors of war units are back. I forgot their existence. Anyway, it wouldn't have made a difference. The Dutch still hold this, sort of, kind of, which is to say it hasn't been conquered yet. The revolt has to be squelched, and whatever's there has to be destroyed. In a sense, this is just a time playing out thing. But the problem, the Dutch Navy's been destroyed at this point. They tried to make an escape and tried to engage the English. They succeeded, and then succeeded in losing the wind gauge again and losing the battle again. So there's really no hope for the Dutch now. And the only hope they really have is, well, if I surrender quickly, at least I'll be out of this war, maybe with less cost. Yeah, I'm going to lose Zealand, and that sucks, probably. But I'm not going to lose New York, which I actually don't care about. You know, I mean, the point is, I want to get out of this as cheaply as possible, but New York wouldn't matter. But the English are going to take Zealand. If I'm not careful, the Spaniards might start claiming Portuguese territory and taking control of that. Alternatively, if they conquer Portugal, they could end up taking them over as a minor. At the very least, Prussia is going to get Oldenburg, blah, blah, blah. In the Swedish situation, there is nothing that can happen. The Russians have no navy and no way to get to Sweden. And the Swedes have a navy, but not enough force to push their way on board. The Russians have actually spread their forces back out into more of a peace-like structure. And to some extent, their argument may be, hey, you should just accept what's come. I've taken Finland, and you're not doing anything about it. On the other hand, the Swedes might be willing to make a peace here. Or to not make a peace, on the thought of, well, the Russians have a slightly bigger army. They are actually making an attrition roll with this unit. Nobody else on the board of the Swedes and Russians don't have to make attrition rolls because they're not conflicting, so they can spread their troops out to where they live, which is what the Russians did, and the Swedes were essentially there to begin with. And by live, it's their mustering zones. They're fine within those. You can have one extra unit per stack in a mustering zone beyond what lives there. So, which could be a mercenary or whatever. So in a sense, the Swedes aren't losing anything, but there's a problem. Russia's getting 18 points a turn for this. Sweden's getting 9 points. If they can come to some sort of agreement, maybe just a status quo handing Karelia over would be sufficient for the Russians, they will get out of that war. The Dutch war is more difficult to get out of. In fact, I don't think the Dutch can... Nobody's going to accept their surrender unless they've lost everything, right? Because right now they've lost 1 province and a half. They're going to give 2 demands. They give nothing. It's one of the problems with the Dutch is that they can't create a compelling reason why anybody wants to give them peace. And with the naval defeats, etc., they've fallen behind. And again, countries that are at war get to stay kind of more likely where their value is, which is, again, why Russia wants to keep this war going. Some of these other countries, Prussia and Spain, are not too thrilled with what's going on in their alliance war, and there aren't really, opportunities left. The big opportunity was that naval battle that they won, the land battles that they won. There's really only this left to take. Everything else is just, hey, let's just sit here and, not gain anything. The English, though, are in favor of the war continuing because they can hunt down the Dutch merchants. And if the Dutch merchant fleet gets hunted badly enough, it could go into extinction. I.e., if the company's not making money and they don't have enough to pay off their structure, which is a lot, $13. Now, they're nowhere near this kind of situation right now. But if you hunt them hard enough, their whole commercial side goes away, and that, obviously that's what happened to France, and it's just terrible. You have to then start convincing people that you have to take a tax policy, and you have to convince people to come use your resources, which might be very difficult in a world where the Dutch don't have shipping anymore, because they're taking up a lot of spaces. So there's going to be a lot of valuable spaces that open up. That's England's kind of fantasy ending here, is to finish off the Dutch merchant marine.